is such a stressful situation to have to play these games in. You have to be confident in your strategies. You have to be confident in how you approach the game. And you also have to have that confidence looking at the team that is just defined this weekend. Again, it's that Dragapult, Togekiss, Colossal, at least for our side of the bracket, Joe.
Absolutely. I know there's been more Blastoise over in other regions, but we've been here with a different water type in our Shifu Rapid Strike helping out the Colossal, and that's what James Mainey has brought. Also, Players Cup 3 Global Finals, James made last time, making it out of Oceania, so looking to make it 2 consecutive Players Cups that he is able to get to the Global Finals on. That Colossal team that we have seen so much with the Togekiss adjustment instead of Galarian Moltres. Iuele on the other end, the 3rd seed in Oceania, coming into region finals. So a multiple time Brisbane regions top cut in top 8, Sydney regionals top 8 as well in 2019, and then top 32 at the first Oceania International Championship back in 2017 with another team composition we're very familiar with the Dusclops, Glastrier, Trick Room stuff, Regieleki, Tapu Fini, Urshifu, Single Strike, and Incineroar.
The G-Max single striker Shifu is something we haven't seen a lot of this weekend. And speaking of Urshifu, James's own Urshifu does not have access to the Gigantamax factor, which I thought was also something interesting to note. I don't think it's going to come into play in this matchup in particular, but since, you know, you're not really Dynamaxing or Gigantamaxing your Urshifu when you have the Colossal alongside of it, but could be an interesting adjustment to put James's own flair on this team. But like we saw earlier in the day, this is another matchup where the Colossal team is facing off against a team that's most likely going to want to use Trick Room and maybe use a Pokemon like Regieleki or the Urshifu Single Strike to ensure that whatever your Trick Room counters are, they will be ineffective. Send in Glastrier, and then Glastrier has a lot of fun. In the past, we saw the Togekiss and the Dragapult work together to try and power through the Trick Room. We also saw Colossal and Urshifu make an attempt at it. I'm curious to see what James is going to decide to do, as both of those leads do have their merits when facing off against something like a Regieleki and a Dusclops.
Yeah, I think, you know, going back to your point about not having Gigantamax options on the Urshifu Rapid Strike, one assumption you can make with Dragapult, G-Max Rillaboom, Togekiss Colossal, there's maybe 1% of scenarios you can imagine you would need to Gigantamax the Urshifu. Of course, with Surging Strikes having a significantly lower base power compared to Single Strike's Wicked Blow as well, that would also hurt your damage output because you have Aqua Jet and Surging Strikes as your G-Max attacks there for it. So or your regular Dynamax attacks, I should say. So that's what I would assume why he doesn't have G-Max here, because he's never really going to need to click it. But Urshifu Single Strike, a Pokemon that we have not seen too much of, especially in comparison to Rapid Strike. I think that says more about the viability of Colossal, because you need Rapid Strike next to it, than it necessarily does about Urshifu Single Strike, which I view as a very consistent and very, oppressive Pokemon in VGC.
Yeah, at least in the part of the ladder on Battle Stadium that I reside in, I see a lot of those Urshifu Single Strikes, and they're certainly a Pokemon to watch out for. So we'll just have to jump into this game one and see if the Urshifu is going to show up and bring some of that amazing offensive pressure that you were talking about, Joe.
Dusclops and Regieleki is the lead for the top of your screen with Luke Iuele, and on the bottom of the screen is Incineroar and Rillaboom for James Mainey. This is, the start of this set here. Didn't want to... I think both of these trainers wanted to play it a little safe on this opening turn, if I'm just thinking out loud here. With Incineroar Rillaboom, that's definitely safer than, committing to Colossal right away on turn one.
It's definitely safer, and you have access to two very important tools. You have Fake Out and you have Taunt. Fake Out on both the Incineroar and the Rillaboom, and Taunt on the Incineroar. All James has to do to stop Trick Room from happening, at least for the foreseeable future, would be to click Fake Out into the Regieleki and Taunt into the Dusclops slot. And while it's possible that Luke is able to predict that and plays around it as carefully as he can, forcing the Dusclops to switch around and forcing whatever Pokemon comes in to take its place to take damage can be hugely detrimental in the flow of the game.
It looks like James is really laboring over this decision on who he wants to fake out, who, if he wanted to knock off the Dusclops slot or something like that. Fortunately for him, though, he didn't really commit too hard, as Incineroar will switch into Dusclops slot in the field, intimidating both of James's Pokemon, lowering their attack by 1 stage. The fake out from Incineroar will connect onto Regieleki, so no attack from Regieleki, and U-turn, giving you some switching priority here in Rillaboom, which can really be helpful the later the game goes on. One, we all know how this dance goes when both trainers have an Incineroar on their team. So you got Party Shot, you got Volt Switch on Regieleki, Rillaboom has the U-turn. These pivoting moves are very important.
They are, and I would not be surprised if we see another round of them in this turn too. The Dragapult is in a comfortable position knowing that Incineroar on the opposing side of the field can only hit it with Snarl or Flare Blitz for damage, cannot drop its stats thanks to that clear body ability. And I think this is why we've been seeing a lot of these Colossal players rely on Dynamaxing Dragapult throughout this tournament. Everything that you bring to sort of stop the Colossal, Dragapult has a good matchup against. And with those max moves that give it access to speed control, give it access to dropping your opponent's attack, dropping your opponent's defense, you can see why it's been such a popular pick.
And here it is again, Dynamax Dragapult for James here in Game 1. A very popular Pokemon, putting in, a lot of offensive pressure that can go for this turn, except that damage will be lessened just a little bit, about half the damage you would be, because the Reflect went up and Regieleki is still going to get knocked out through Reflect, because that is how frail of a Pokemon it is. It's really there to be fast and do damage, not to tank hits. So Dragapult breaks through Reflect and knocks it out. Getting a defense drop as well onto Luke's Incineroar might not matter too much, because we assume it will eventually switch out on its own as well, just like James's Incineroar did here with the Parting Shot, as he has his choice to go back into Rillaboom or Urshifu.
That is something interesting about this Regieleki, that it prioritized the Reflect there. This is a light clay Regieleki, and it's not going to be going for that big damage like you mentioned, Joe, necessarily. I mean, it's certainly an option, but I think this Regieleki was happy to get that Reflect up on the field and then make way for a Pokemon like Dusclops to try and get Trick Room up next turn.
James essentially having to decide his Parting Shot, sacrificial Pokemon there, because either Rillaboom or Urshifu was going to have to take that Parting Shot, lowering their attack and special attack by 1 stage, and Incineroar is able to switch out safely into Dusclops, who stays at full health this turn. A nice safe switch in for it to potentially try to set up Trick Room next turn.
You could even send Incineroar right back in and get that second attack drop onto that Urshifu and threaten it with a flinch, and also break the Focus Sash that it's holding. So Incineroar, it's such an important Pokemon when you're trying to play these slower strategies to try and get Trick Room up, because these attack drops really add up. Yes, it's true that Urshifu, if it decides to go for Wicked Blow this turn, or excuse me, it's a water type Urshifu, so if it goes for Surging Strikes, those critical hits will mitigate those attack drops, but still, having that support so that those close combats won't hurt as much is going to be important as well. So Luke doing a great job of ensuring Trick Room will go up this turn if he decides that's the strategy he's going for. You have to wonder what that last Pokemon is in Luke's party, and looking at Team Preview, you have to assume it's going to either be the Glastrier or the Tapu Fini, both of whom would love it if the dimensions got all twisted around.
Yeah, Gabby, I would argue the Urshifu Rapid Strike definitely would have a significantly worse matchup against Dusclops compared to Single Strike, who has critical hit Wicked Blows. So that's why Dragapult needs to bear much of the the offense early on here. breaking down Dusclops' HP, bringing it down to about half of its HP there, getting a defense drop as well, because you need these super effective ghost attacks since you don't have dark access on your Urshifu. The Twisted Dimensions are up now for Trick Room, so now things that are slower, like the Dusclops and the Incineroar, are going to be moving first.
I wonder if the Incineroar on Luke's side of the field this turn just goes straight for a Flare Blitz into that Rillaboom. I think if we see that Incineroar go for it, that's an indication that Tapu Fini might be hanging around in the back of Luke's party. If we see the Incineroar go for a different attack, it's probably the Glastrier. So this is a great opportunity for James to get some information. Also switching things around, knowing that now Trick Room is active, those turns are going to count down quickly. And you want to make sure that you give yourself the best opportunity to have those fast attackers come in and be successful. Switching is the best way to accomplish that.
There is the Flare Blitz, though, from Incineroar, so James now sees that information. The same point that you're thinking of, Gabby, is that maybe Tapu Fini is in the back because he tried to get rid of the Rillaboom on that turn, but the Dusclops will be gone after that Max Phantasm because of the defense drop from the previous turn that did turn what could have been a two-hit KO into a guaranteed two-hit KO from that. So James, a very effective 3 turns of Dynamax out of Dragapult here.
I am honestly surprised that this Dragapult has done so well despite Trick Room being up. Luke hasn't revealed any Pokemon that threaten it, and I am very curious as the final Pokemon is revealed to be Glastrier. How this Glastrier is going to fare, knowing that James still has access to all 4 of his Pokemon. To Glastrier's benefit, it has the opportunity to go for Dynamax immediately. It still has speed on its side thanks to the Trick Room. But really all James has to do to ensure Glastrier won't be as big of a problem is switch that Incineroar in and out using those parting shots, the Intimidates. Those will mitigate any Chilling Neigh boosts that this Glastrier is able to find and make this a really difficult win condition for Luke. James has just been keeping his cool and doing what this Colossal team does best, switching defensively to hurt your opponent's offense.
Well, it is time for Glastrier to Dynamax with Luke with his back up against the wall down to his final 2 Pokemon. There's no time to horse around in this matchup. You gotta start doing damage. Max Hailstorm will target the Dragapult. Super effective hit, and that is going to take a knockout. So no more attacks from Dragapult here in Game 1. Of course, you do have the matching Incineroars here. It could be a factor. Chilling Neigh is going to give Glastrier an attack boost, but the Incineroars, you're going to have to know which one is faster or which one is, slower, in this case, in Trick Room, for future battles. You're going to need that information. And as of right now, Luke's Incineroar has moved first under the Trick Room. So Parting Shot, though, from Incineroar still has this chance to switch out, lowering the attack of Glastrier there, negating the Chilling Neigh, essentially, and now he can bring in Urshifu to this position, who is still at full HP, has the Focus Sash intact, and can go for a close combat if James wants to.
Yeah, and this is going to be a interesting interaction because, yes, the Urshifu will take damage from the hail, but thanks to the help of that grassy terrain, it should be back up to full HP, which means the Focus Sash will still be active. As long as Focus Sash is protecting you from a knockout from full HP, it doesn't matter if you got that little bit of chip in earlier in the game. Doesn't matter. It's still there. It still has your back. So a great knowledge of mechanics as well from James. Also, this Incineroar making another appearance, I think surprising no one at this point. I feel really bad for Luke's Incineroar. It does have the benefit of being slower. We've seen these two face off enough to know that I think the Luke's Incineroar is definitely the slowest one on the field, but all those Intimidates really gotta hurt.
Yeah, and if you think about it, Incineroar switching out, the beauty of Parting Shot and those pivot moves, it switched out, lowered Glastrier's attack by 1 stage, switched back in and caused Intimidate. So it's essentially like James got a double Intimidate down in 1 turn, and Incineroar took no damage for it.
Yep. And that's how you play against a Pokemon like Glastrier, or maybe against some of those weakness policy utilizing Pokemon that don't have the clear body ability. You just switch your Incineroar in and out as many times as you can fit in, and it just makes it so that Dynamax is utterly useless.
Urshifu going for Detect this turn, which essentially works the same as Protect.
Wow.
Fake out into the Glastrier slot, though, which is a Dynamax Pokemon, so it cannot be flinched. This attack, this Max Knuckle will go into the Urshifu slot, raising its attack by 1 stage and helping the Incineroar as well there. But I do question the fake out towards the Glastrier slot instead of the Incineroar. It ends up not mattering, to be honest, because the Flare Blitz went into Urshifu's Protect. But kind of a risky play there.
It's a show of confidence in a way that could backfire, and I understand why James feels confident in this position. I think as long as he continues switching these Pokemon around, getting those parting shots and intimidates in, he'll be fine. You have to remember that there's always a chance of a critical hit, which will bypass any stat changes and ensure that Glastrier is doing the amount of damage it would do otherwise. And yeah, maybe one fake out in the grand scheme of things won't change things too much. You have to stay on your toes because, again, if you lose this round, you are out of this tournament.
Max Quake from Glastrier here, super effective into Incineroar. Will be able to take it down. You can see Incineroar is typically a very bulky Pokemon, but because of Dynamax attacks, we've seen a lot of Incineroars getting pretty much one hit on this day here. Chilling Neigh will give it an attack boost, so you had the Max Knuckle from before, and now Chilling Neigh to bring it back down to neutral. Flare Blitz from Incineroar into the Rillaboom slot is super effective, but not enough for a knockout there. There will be some recoil on the Incineroar's end there, but Gabby, refresh my memory on the Glastrier's item, and the only thing I can think of on James' end is if it was weakness policy, you don't want the Flare Blitz to activate Glastrier's weakness policy, and that's why you went for Fake Out?
So I have good news for you, Joe. It's not weakness policy, it's actually Life Orb.
Life Orb.
Which just makes it even more curiouser.
Right, so the Urshifu is the final Pokemon, as we saw earlier, on James's end. So yes, it has the Life Orb recoil every turn as well. That's the damage it had taken at that point. 2 Pokemon to 2 in this situation. The Rillaboom does have access to priority. Trick Room did just end as well. Urshifu is really the threat here for James. He has to decide what does Urshifu want to target down.
Yeah, so now that Trick Room has expired, Urshifu can go for the knockout on Incineroar with Surging Strikes, can go for some big damage onto that Glastrier with Close Combat. I think the Incineroar has to be the priority, but if Glastrier is able to find a knockout on this Urshifu, then this poor Rillaboom, I don't think it's going to be able to win the game for James.
Close Combat does not get a knockout, though, on to Glastrier. So Close Combat into Urshifu, taking it down, and Rillaboom is now by itself against Glastrier and Incineroar. Glastrier will lower its defenses, though, on this turn. It gets another Chilling Neigh boost. So that means that Glastrier has claimed all 3 knockouts so far at this point against James' Pokemon. Will it be able to get the last one, or is Incineroar going to be able to have the honor?
Well, I mean, Rillaboom will get the opportunity to attack at the beginning of this turn, but a Grassy Glide probably will pick up the knockout on Glastrier, will not knock out that Incineroar. So it looks like Luke has done the impossible and found a way to win this game 1, even though things looked so dire for him a few turns ago with those Intimidates, with those parting shots. This is why you cannot underestimate Glastrier.
U-turn from Rillaboom is a neutral attack, so this is nice information for James to know in upcoming turns how much that U-turn did. It looked like it did over 30%. Flare Blitz from Incineroar will take it out, and Luke Iuele will win game 1 here in losers round 3. 1 win away from keeping his hopes alive and moving on here in the Oceania bracket, and James is really going to to need to make an adjustment here. What started out strong with Dragapult, right? We even praised Dragapult. Wow, Trick Room is up, and you have gotten 3 full Dynamax attacks off out of Dragapult, staying at full health the whole time. Like, that was a positive start. But remember, Reflect was up that whole time. Rillaboom is a physical attacker. Dragapult, Incineroar, Urshifu. Those were 4 physical attackers facing through Regieleki's Reflect.
And that is something you have to be very cautious of when deciding what Pokemon to bring to a game. Usually a Pokemon like Regieleki will only have the opportunity to set up one of those screens. Even though this one does have both Light Screen and Reflect available to it, you just have to hit it once and then it'll probably get knocked out, and whatever screen is up is up. By bringing 4 physical attackers and allowing Regieleki to set up Reflect, you're essentially having your own damage output for the rest of that game, which is really dangerous. As we saw, Luke was able to stay calm, keep that Glastrier going, using the Max Knuckle and Chilling Naze to make those Intimidates not as scary as they seemed, and win game 1. Going into game 2, I think we have to see James take a bit more of a cautious approach against this team. Definitely still go for those big hits. Definitely still keep that Incineroar switching in and out in front of that Glastrier. But, just be careful. You can't necessarily afford to waste a turn.
No, definitely, especially at this point when you are down 1 game here, every turn is crucial. On top of the fact that you're in losers and that you're down 1-0, you don't have the room to make any mistakes. Maybe there is a pretty strong special attacker on his team there in Colossal. I'd argue was a pretty strong special attacker. Bringing 4 physical attackers against the Reflect there on the Regieleki, Regieleki putting in a lot of support for the team. Even though it got knocked out right away, it had those 8 turns of boosted defenses essentially, and you kind of want to spread your damage outputs out as a team, so you don't have just one type of damage source.
Yeah, and I think the residual damage from a Gmax Vocalith would also be helpful, just given how slow that game progressed. So let's go ahead and jump into game 2 and see what adjustments these players make as we determine who will be moving on in this tournament.
Dusclops Regieleki is the lead for Luke, just like we saw in game 1. And Colossal Urshifu, there it is. Usually if you play a team like this and you have a win condition in Colossal or like a weather setter or something like that, and you lose game 1 without it, very often the adjustment is to bring it game 2 and try to sweep.
And that is the adjustment you need to have gone for, given how that game 1 played out. To Regieleki and Dusclops' benefit, all Regieleki has to do is set up Light Screen here, and the Dusclops should be able to get Trick Room up on the field. But then, it's going to be able to do a ton of damage, and I don't think last year is going to have a way to hit it, get a one-hit knockout, so... Well, it's going to be a tough call. Yes, the speed will most likely be in Luke's favor, but can this Colossal do what Dragapult did in game 1, find those 3 attacks and just get those knockouts where it counts?
Aqua Jet will activate Colossal's Steam Engine, not only drastically increasing its speed, but also activating the weakness policy, increasing Colossal's attack and special attack by 2 stages each. G-Max Vocalith, the Gigantamax attack that everybody is scared of, will connect onto Regieleki and knock it out in 1 hit. There won't be a Reflect this time around for Luke, so it's going to have to take neutral damage at this point. Dusclops is free to set up Trick Room though, so that will help out Luke in this case, because you can bring in a Trick Room set or a Trick Room sweeper, say like last year, and now because of Steam Engine, Colossal is super slow.
You have to wonder, though, how much damage will this Glastrier take from an attack from that Colossal? It has to Dynamax this turn in order to give itself enough bulk to power through whatever's going to be thrown out here. But if Luke has a way to maybe use that Dusclops and try and weaken the Colossal or otherwise turn things in his favor, I think that would be a great way to start off these Trick Room turns.
Luke is going to Dynamax the Glastrier here, just like we were expecting. We did have the benefit of seeing that James went for max guard on this turn on Colossal. So remember, this is now the second turn of Trick Room. You it's lasts for 5 turns. You essentially get 4 turns to use Trick Room here. Maybe max guards will let you endure through. But Hayes gets rid of all of those stat boosts. That includes the speed. That includes the special attack. The whole reason you run Colossal is now gone on James's end.
And that is exactly why getting Trick Room up was super important for Luke. Yes, it would have been nice to get like a light screen on top of that from that Regieleki, but really the fact that James honed in on the Regieleki as the bigger threat that turn allowed Dusclops to get the speed in Luke's favor, set Glastrier up to knock out this Togekiss or this Colossal in like one hit, and on top of that, make the weakness policy useless on Colossal, which will allow Glastrier to take several attacks from it and probably find a knockout in the process. Haze is such a fantastic move on Dusclops for exactly this reason. And Dusclops could even potentially haze away any Intimidates or any parting shots as well. So as long as these two are on the field together, Luke is going to start gaining momentum to bring him to the next round of this tournament.
Haze is such a valuable move that sometimes Dusclops doesn't have room for on the team builder, but luckily for Luke, he has found a way to put Haze there. And that paint split didn't really do too much, and the max Hailstorm as well is doing, negligible damage considering it was ineffective attack into the Colossal there.
The Hailstorm was definitely a safety in case that Togekiss stuck around and went for Follow Me, but still, look at how little damage Glastrier took from that super effective max Flare.
Right, that's the honestly right there, like cut turn 1 to what are we on turn 3 here now, and just have them side by side. Look at the difference weakness policy, in a pro sense for Colossal, and then without it in a con sense. How much worse Colossal is without the weakness policy boost, pointing back to how crucial Haze was.
Unfortunately for Luke, I think he really wants to go for something like a max Hailstorm, or a max Quake here to find a knockout on that Incineroar, maybe find a knockout on the Colossal. I don't think you can necessarily go for it. I think you have to stick with the max Hailstorm in order to keep the Sunlight off the field, because right now the Sunlight isn't just boosting the Colossal's attacks, it's also going to be boosting that Flare Blitz from the Incineroar as well. And if James decides to keep the Incineroar on the field, which, is a toss-up. If the Glastrier goes for a Max Quake into that spot, something like a Togekiss would certainly be happier to take that damage. It would be a tough call. So it looks like the Togekiss is taking the place of the Colossal. The big question is, who did Glastrier target?
Nightshade goes into Incineroar though, and Max Quake, we see the animation, so that means it's not the flying type. That is the Incineroar, and that is a super effective hit, taking down Incineroar in this matchup. Yet again, that's 2 matches in a row that James's Incineroar really has not been too helpful. It's just, taken a lot of damage from the Dynamax Glastrier, and the Chilling Neigh is going to counteract the initial Intimidate it took on the previous turn that Incineroar switched in. Of course, don't forget Gmax Vocalith. There is that residual damage every turn at the end that is bringing Glastrier lower and lower, as well as the Dusclops lower, which can maybe put things in range for the Togekiss or the Urshifu to knock out Dusclops.
Yeah, and if Luke's last Pokemon is the Incineroar or the Tapu Fini, really, I think he's going to have a nice time once this Trick Room has expired. Glastrier has held on long enough to get 1, maybe even 2 more attacks in before the Twisted Dimensions return to normal, and that's going to be key. It's at neutral attack, which is important to keep in mind. That means that something like the Icicle Crash might not be a guaranteed knockout on the Togekiss this turn, but still, Luke just playing through these Trick Room turns really well, not letting the weakness policy on the Colossal scare him, and bringing this game to a point where it's really Glastrier's game to win.
Absolutely, it is. Obviously, it's taken a bunch of turns of G-Max Volcalith damage, but it also has the Life Orb recoil, so it's eventually getting lower and lower there. Luke has not revealed that fourth Pokemon. I'm sure James is really wondering what it is. He will show off now that Glastrier switches into Incineroar. At full HP is going to intimidate both of James's Pokemon, only really mattering on the Urshifu potentially from a close combat. If Urshifu goes for the Surging Strikes, those will always critically strike, so that is not going to matter. Follow Me from Togekiss, though, will redirect Pain Split from Togekiss, or toward Togekiss, I should say, and just like that, it's like Dusclops has taken no damage at all. Close combat does over half to Incineroar, lowering Urshifu's defenses there, but that's as the Twisted Dimensions return to normal. Incineroar can fake out something, and Dusclops can try to Trick Room again.
And I think that's what Luke's going to go for, knowing that the Incineroar and the Glastrier are his two last Pokemon. Ensuring that Dusclops moves first throughout this endgame not only gives him the opportunity to continue using the Nightshade to put these Pokemon within knockout range to break any focus sashes, you know, do that extra 50 HP worth of damage that can be very helpful in these games, but also could potentially go for some of those side pain splits as well to attempt to heal up the Incineroar or the Glastrier. Admittedly, that's a little bit more of a risky play, and I think you have to be very confident in predicting what your opponent is going to do if you choose to go for it, but it is an option, and it just is showing how disruptive this Dusclops has been throughout these games.
So which slot did Incineroar target? It was the Colossal switching in to Urshifu there. He wanted to break the focus sash instead of targeting down Togekiss, who now gets a Yawn that will connect on to Dusclops. Dusclops is able to set up the Trick Room here, so the Twisted Dimensions are back, you know, I'd say return to normal for us because we're so used to Trick Room being on the field. It's actually more common than the regular dimensions at this point. But remember, Colossal's a very slow Pokemon without the Steam Engine boost at this point. That Fake Out, if it went into the Togekiss slot instead, this Dusclops wouldn't be threatened of being put to sleep this turn.
You have to wonder if Incineroar is going to be faster in Trick Room than this Colossal, because a Nightshade and a Flare Blitz would certainly pick up that knockout. It's possible that a Flare Blitz alone will be enough to knock out the Colossal. I think it must be very tempting for Luke to switch in that Glastrier to ensure the Dusclops does not go asleep this turn, but Glastrier, if it takes any damage from these two Pokemon, that could have been huge, and it almost looks like James ran out of time.
Yeah, down to literally the last second, James was debating what attack to use or what move to go for. He decided Follow Me to redirect any attacks. Earth Power, Colossal is slower than Incineroar, so it does attack first because of Trick Room. Incineroar is down. The sunlight is fading, and Luke is down to his final two Pokemon. Dusclops now has to be asleep because of the effects of Yawn from the previous turn, so Glastrier is gonna have to switch in for Luke, but you know, with how low health it is at, I don't know if Glastrier can take this by itself.
So Glastrier is in a position where it could knock out either the Colossal or the Togekiss. The big question is, does James go for Follow Me or Protect on that Togekiss? Or Yawn, I suppose. Yawn would be another safe play here. But if Luke is able to predict the Follow Me and goes for a Icicle Crash and knocks out the Togekiss, it's possible that the Dusclops wakes up and then does 2 turns worth of damage to knock out the Colossal. If Togekiss goes for a Protect and the Glastrier attacks the Colossal, same things, roles reversed. So going for the Protect on Glastrier here means that the Dusclops will have an opportunity to wake up sooner, and I think that's going to be super important in this endgame.
Right, Luke essentially just trying to wait out this sleep here on this turn. He knows he has a couple of turns of Trick Room still left. The Heat Wave avoiding Dusclops probably wouldn't have done too much damage since it's a spread attack, but it would have been a nice little chunk of damage. And we're essentially in the same spot we were the last turn, right, Gabby? It's like, does Togekiss Follow Me? Does it go for Yawn? You're really in the same scenario. All it did was it now gives you a better chance of Dusclops waking up.
It does, and you know, I'm so focused on these two Pokemon. James also still has the Urshifu in the back of his party as well, so Luke's win con here is getting closer and closer to this Dusclops waking up as soon as possible.
Follow Me is the choice out of James. Togekiss will redirect any attacks towards itself. Dusclops unfortunately staying asleep for another turn as Icicle Crash will connect into the Togekiss. Follow Me doesn't matter since Glastrier hit the target it wanted to. So now it's up to this Heat Wave as Glastrier will get another attack boost on its end, lose a little bit of health from its Life Orb recoil. Heat Wave does connect on to Glastrier, knocking it out, and now it is Dusclops at relatively healthy, maybe around 80% of its HP, but it is facing off against a full health Urshifu and then this Colossal as well.
I wonder if the Dusclops is able to get a pain split onto the Urshifu once it's taken more damage. Like, let's assume, hypothetically speaking, that Dusclops wakes up this turn, goes for a Nightshade into the Colossal, and then next turn, Trick Room, and then next turn, somehow it's still around on the field, pain split into Urshifu. I wonder if that would be enough damage to put Urshifu within Nightshade knockout range. Unfortunately, no wake up, but that does mean Dusclops will wake up next turn.
Yep, we're going to have to wait to find out what Luke went for on that turn, as it is staying asleep for the third and final turn of sleep. Surging strikes into the Dusclops. They are going to be 3 critical hits there, not too much damage. Again, the base power is it's relatively low on surging strikes because the benefit is that you get to attack, 3 times and they always critically strike. Not doing too much. It looks like you are going to need 2 attacks with the Meteor Beam and then the additional surging strikes here, which is definitely what James went for.
Yeah, that should be enough to knock out this Dusclops, unless something very bizarre happens, which means we'll be going into a Game 3 to decide who is moving on to the next round here in the loser's side of the bracket.
I love that we get a Game 3 here, especially in the scenario where James, from the get-go in Game 2, his Colossal gets the 1 boost, it knocks out Regieleki, and then after that, Haze happens and it's a completely different game. He has to adjust on the fly and win through the rest of the team, kind of, holding down Glastrier and Dusclops and the utility on the other side of the field. Regular Colossal with no speed boosts and no weakness fallacy boosts was still there at the end to claim that victory.
And that is honestly a great adaptation to a very heavy Trick Room approach in this game. I also really like how we didn't see as many Incineroar being switched around turn after turn. Those turns that Incineroar was switching were turned into turns where Incineroar was doing damage, and I think that was also a key difference between Games 1 and Games 2. I think if I were Luke, I would go into this Game 3 with a similar mindset, but I'd be asking myself, how can I force my opponent to switch more? How can I force my opponent to slow things down so then, like in Game 1, I can just power through? But I really do love the adjustment from both James and Luke in that game too. It was very, very close. If Dusclops had woken up a couple of turns sooner, we could have been looking at a completely different outcome.
Yep, that's a good point. We'll never know what would have happened if Dusclops woke up earlier. But we have a Game 3 on our hands. Scabby's very simple. Winner moves on, loser goes home. So let's jump into this action in Game 3 to decide the winner on the other side of losers round 3 in Oceania. You're going to have the Regieleki and Dusclops as the lead yet again on Luke's side. And then for James, the Colossal Urshifu option for him that ended up working out in a somewhat roundabout way. This was the lead that did end up winning the game.
It was, and Luke can adjust for that. Maybe switch out the Regieleki if you're worried about losing it so early on. Having a faster Pokemon at the end of Trick Room certainly would be appreciated, but it looks like Regieleki is going to try to ride out this G-Max Vocalith once again. You have to assume it's going to get that KO once again like we saw in Game 2.
Regieleki is going to be slower after this Aqua Jet from Urshifu that is going to activate Steam Engine on Colossal, making it super, super fast, as well as giving it the weakness policy boost, so it's going to be super, super strong as well. Last time around, Game 2, Regieleki just straight up got knocked out on the first turn. This G-Max Volcalith is going to target the Regieleki yet again, so 2 games in a row, Luke just losing his Regieleki essentially for free off of a very, very well-known strategy of Aqua Jet into Steam Engine, for your G-Max, and Dusclops Trick Rooming yet again.
Dusclops can go for Haze yet again at the start of this next turn, but maybe looking at how comfortable the Colossal was in Game 2 under Trick Room, having lost those speed boosts, maybe that is going to change how Luke approaches this turn. You could try and go for a Nightshade and a Max Quake from this Glastrier onto the Colossal and try and score a knockout if you don't think it's going to Max Guard. I believe in Game 2 we did see that Colossal go for a Max Guard during the second turn of Dynamax, so if Luke is able to predict whether or not James goes for that a second time, scores the knockout early, I think Luke will be setting himself up in a way for this Game 3 where a lot of the problems that existed in Game 2, those heat waves, that meteor beam at the end of things, are no longer accessible, and that is the adjustment that Luke has to play towards.
The best assumption I can make onto just letting Regieleki go down is if it's Glastrier and Incineroar in the back. We've already seen Glastrier here, obviously. So if that fourth Pokemon's Incineroar, neither of them really want to switch into a G-Max Volcalith, right? So
no.
you're kind of sending Regieleki out there as an insurance plan to target down that slot, so Dusclops can safely get Trick Room on the field, and now you have Glastrier switch in for free, where you have access to Dusclops hazing away all of those stat boosts on Colossal's end, which is exactly what we saw in Game 2. Max Hailstorm from Glastrier into the Togekiss is super effective.
It's a one-hit knockout.
A one-hit KO. Not only getting rid of that pesky follow me on future turns like we saw in the previous game, but also giving Glastrier a Chilling Neigh boost. The only Pokemon on the field right now that has the attack boost, if you think about it, because of the haze the last time. The only stat change at all is the Chilling Neigh boost, and Max Flare without weakness policy just does not do enough damage. It will get rid of the hail, so now the next one has a sun boost. Maybe it's enough for a knockout, but Colossal really needs that weakness policy damage.
And the Yawn has been removed from the field as well, which was another thing standing in the way of Luke's win back in Game 2. Correctly predicting that James would switch out the Urshifu, just like we saw in that Game 2, targeting the Togekiss. I think that was a really good read by Luke, because it could have very well have been that Incineroar coming in that turn to bring the Intimidate to, pair up alongside of the Sun and get those Sun boosted Flare Blitzes going. A great read. Luke has to keep that momentum going. He needs to keep scoring these knockouts so these Intimidates don't start adding up. James, on the other hand, I think even though it's tempting to go after the Glastrier, look at the Pokemon in the back of your party. You have the full health Incineroar, you have your Urshifu. The Dusclops is going to be the problem long term. You need to start targeting down that Pokemon.
Urshifu will switch into that slot, so the Pain Split really not doing too much there. Helps out Dusclops more than it really hurts Urshifu in that sense. Max Quake from Glastrier will be super effective into Colossal, and Colossal never stood a chance against that. That's now a second Chilling Neigh boost for the Glastrier here. There still are 2 more turns of Trick Room to use after this one, and of course Glastrier has that third and final turn of Dynamax up and coming the next time around, so Luke is in a significantly better position this time around.
He is. Glastrier will not be able to be flinched by Fake Out. Yes, it will be intimidated, but it's just going to negate the Chilling Neigh boost we just saw. Urshifu's Focus Sash has been broken. Incineroar certainly can be knocked out by a Max Quake, as we've seen in past games. All Luke has to do is keep his eyes on the prize, target the Incineroar, then target the Urshifu, and move on in this tournament.
It's going to be a couple of turns before Luke can do that. Of course, you do not want to get ahead of yourself in this situation. You got to take it, the old cliche of one turn at a time, and understand that you have to really take advantage of these 2 turns of Trick Room while you have them. Dusclops with Nightshade connecting on to Incineroar. Looks like because of exactly that HP count, if you never touched Incineroar with just Nightshade, it would take 5 turns. But luckily for Luke, the Glastrier takes care of the rest right away. And that is a 3rd knockout for Glastrier, a 3rd Chilling Neigh boost to its name. Of course, the Intimidate negates the 1 of it, so it still is really strong. Moral of the story is that the Glastrier is still extremely strong with another turn of Trick Room on its way. The only thing is Urshifu's Close Combat will take it down here. So luckily for James, the Close Combat can get rid of Glastrier, and Luke is down to his final 2 Pokemon.
The Dusclops, though, is in such a fantastic position. Yes, it is still going to take damage from Gmax Vocalith for a couple more turns, but Urshifu cannot target Dusclops with Close Combat, can only use Surging Strikes. The sun is up on the field, further weakening the damage of those Surging Strikes. Urshifu has enough health left to take 3 Nightshades from the Dusclops, so you have to ask yourself, can 3 rounds of Surging Strikes in the sun pick up the knockout on this Dusclops? I don't think it can. And on top of all of that, you also have the Incineroar to contend with as well.
Flare Blitz and Nightshade going into the Urshifu slot. Obviously, Urshifu was going to detect that turn to avoid any fake out or any damage there. Twisted Dimensions do return to normal, so now Urshifu is the fastest Pokemon on the field. And it looks like James actually locked in Detect again. That's essentially double Protect, 30% chance, and he doesn't get it. Maybe James really needed that Detect to let the sun run out in this scenario, but because he did not get it, that Flare Blitz goes in to Urshifu, and Trick Room is reset up, and Luke is in a prime position to move on in the Oceania region bracket.
That Detect, had it been successful, would have meant the sun ran out just in time, giving Urshifu its only out of Surging Strikes. 1 turn towards the Incineroar, 1 turn towards the Dusclops. Even if that Detect had happened, though, Dusclops would have gotten Trick Room up, and as a result, this Incineroar and this Dusclops would be attacking first.
Flare Blitz does the necessary 1 HP to Urshifu, and Luke Iuele is going to win losers round 3 here in Oceania, keeping his hopes alive of moving